嚟開會下，咁我哋咧就睇一睇我哋嘅會議議程先。
Members, I'll call the meeting to order. Let's go to the agenda. First item, information papers issued since the meeting on the 16th of December 2024. 3 information papers have been issued by the Secretariat to members for reference, which are set out in the agenda. Items for discussion for the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on the 17th of March at 10:45. The administration proposes that we should focus our discussion on the civil service issues in the 2025-26 budget. So there will be just be one item for the next meeting. Members, any comments on the item for discussion for the next meeting? Yes, Mr. Wong Kok. Let's look at the list of discussion items. And also, this panel is on public service. And we're supposed to cover the subvented organizations as well. But now all our items are just on civil service. So perhaps we should at least one meeting to discuss issues related to subvented organizations. Yes, indeed. Let me explain what happened when we last met the Secretariat for the civil service. We are going to have a discussion on that particular issue you mentioned. Perhaps you can refer to the item 17 on subvented organizations, pay and conditions of employment, etc. But because they have different pay structure, for example, education or schools, and also the public health care sector. So we should allow them some time to prepare the necessary information for information. If this is a listed very top of the list, they don't have time. So we did inform the administration that we are going to have a discussion on issues related to subvented organizations. All right. Further question? No? Okay, we'll be focusing on the budget, all the issues related to the civil service will be taken up. All right, so that's what would happen. For next item, you can see in the list, number 17 is on subvented organizations. There will be 3 discussions. All right, let's move on. Item 3 on the agenda, implementation of 5-day week in the government. I would like to invite the officials to join us. Members who would like to speak, please press the button now. May I now invite the Secretary and her colleagues to join us now. Next chair. All right. I now give the floor to Mrs. Ingrid Yang, Secretary for the Civil Service, for an introduction. Madam Chair, as a good employer, the government has been striving to provide a family-friendly working environment, and the 5-day week is one of that system. We have just completed a recent survey. Let me report to you the latest situation with regard to the 5-day week system. The overall system for the implementation of the 5-day week in the government is underpinned by 4 basic principles. 1, no additional staffing resources, no reduction in the condition hours of work, no reduction in emergency services, and also no and also the necessary provision of essential counter services on Sundays and Saturdays will not be affected. As at the end of September 2024, about 141,100 civil servants were working on a 5-day week work pattern, which accounts for about 85% of the strength of the civil service. Compared with the same time in 2022, we are seeing an increase of about 3,900 civil service working on a 5-day week basis. So it's an increase of about 3%. So now it's about 86% of the total who are working on 5-day week pattern. Well, so it's we start from about 75% to then at 82% in 2022, and then now it's 85%. We have encouraged the departments to make good use of technology, and also to take forward the 5-day work pattern gradually. So more and more of civil servants are working on this 5-day week pattern. Many departments are also undergoing or reviewing the effectiveness of the FD work trial schemes. Now 5 work departments are now reviewing the effectiveness or undergoing some trials, which will cover another additional 4,100 civil service. And we have also implemented a new deduction scheme for leave under the 5-day week. It would be the same for those who are not working on a 5-day work civil service vis-a-vis their colleagues are working on a 5-day week civil servants, as far as leave deduction arrangement is concerned. And that is a 5-day of vacation leave will be deducted for every 7 calendar days of leave. We expect that the departments will face some challenges in further implementing the 5-day week pattern for the remaining civil service. We have to stress that this is not a condition of service for civil service. We just want to provide a more family-friendly measure. At the same time, we must uphold the basic principles to make sure that public funds are expended reasonably. However, still, we are still able to cover more civil servants to work in the 5-day week pattern, and some departments are going to try make more to implement more trial schemes. We believe that more and more civil servants will be able to migrate to the 5-day week work pattern, and the civil service would adopt a very pragmatic attitude to look into the feasibility of covering even more civil servants in the future. I'll pause here, and I'm happy to take questions. 7 members have pressed the button to ask questions. They are Mr. An Yun, Mr. Lam Chen Sin, Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Johnny Ng, Mr. Chen Chen Ying, Mr. Dennis Leung, and then Mr. Benson. Look, Mr. Ngan, you have the floor. Well, this subject, 5-day week, is an annual subject for our discussion. And now, this year, we see an increase of 3% of civil servants working on a 5-day week work pattern. So this is progress. I have a few questions. You have the latest survey conducted in September 2024. So I think the next survey will happen this year in September. And that will be there will be another review. What will the Civil Service Bureau do to cover more civil servants and to increase this percentage coverage? What measures have you implemented to achieve this objective of yours? I believe you want to cover more civil servants. And how many posts in the civil service cannot be covered, so that we know that maybe 10% out of the total posts cannot So we need what more should be done to benefit more civil servants. What about the adoption of modern technology such as AI? Can we make use of new technology to enable more civil servants to work on a 5-day week work pattern? And also, what can we do more to enhance the efficiency, and while at the same time we extend the 5-day week work pattern? Well, actually, this is an initiative to be carried out by the department. They would look at the shift arrangement for their colleagues, and because of new technology, they can apply new deployment measures to enable this 5-day week work pattern to be implemented. So I think credit should go to the department's concern for making it possible. So the second question is whether we have a target percentage coverage rate. Well, I've talked about the 4 basic principles for 5-day week pattern. First, service will not be affected, and second, no additional staffing resources will be required. I'm talking about both staffing and funding resources here. So we don't have an objective that, for example, how high the percentage should be in 5 years' time. All depends on whether it can be implemented properly. So on the one hand, we want to introduce more family-friendly measures, and on the other hand, we need to make sure that public funds are expended properly. As for how many posts cannot really adopt this 5-day week work pattern, well, we don't have such a statistic or a survey done. But for some posts, they are more difficult. For example, without any change in new technology or external environment, some posts will be difficult. For example, in departments where the percentage is lower than the others, such as the correctional services department, it's due to their work pattern. There was a trial scheme, but the colleagues there found out that if they have to introduce a 5-day week work pattern, they will have to work longer shifts. So they decided then to revert back to the non-5-day week work pattern because of the physical demand on working long shifts. But we are not going to be complacent. We would have to pay attention to the new developments in technology or the new design in the future for the correctional institutions. Otherwise, it may be difficult. We have to admit that it will be difficult to introduce this work pattern for some departments and some posts. You may have learned from what I've just said that technology is very helpful. Even for civilian posts, for example, if the job involve labor-intensive work such as survey and statistics or counter services, and you can now apply for different services through online platforms, and you may not be reliant on counter services so much. So it would depend on how technologies evolve. We will pay close attention to this. New technology may enable us to deploy our staffs more efficiently and in a more focused manner, and we will pay attention to this development. All right, Mr. Ngan, you may press the button again if you have other questions.
Mr. Lam Chun-sing, thank you, Chair. Well, the government has introduced family-friendly measures for the civil servants. For the 5-day week, it is also one of such measures which should be promoted. At the moment, there is only a biannual survey review, and then only a few number of staff are moving on to the 5-day week. Are we reaching a bottleneck here? are we coming to a stage that fewer and fewer civil servants can work on the 5-day week pattern? My view is that it is not necessary for civil servants to work on 6 days a week. I think it is just a question of manpower resources and deployment. So I would like to know more about the use of technology. Does the government has any plans to use technology for, say, computerizing projects under the CWRF? You have more resources for the purpose, and now you use chatbots. Even the civilians are able to have an AI system in use later. So for the departments, can they make use of such technology and then try to be more targeted and see how such technology can promote a 5-day week work pattern? For example, would it be possible to process some of the issues, on Saturdays and use more chatbots so that during Saturdays and Sundays, the civil servants that have to be on duty can be reduced in number? So I would like to know, will there be more targeted efforts in this respect? The second question, on the mode of rolling out 5-day week. In the past, some staff unions have reflected to the departments with their proposals, and then the department will say that it is up to CSB, and then CSB will say it is up to the individual departments to decide whether they can do 5-day week. So it seems that they are kicking the ball around. But if you look at the paper, you are saying that CSB actually encouraged the departments to try to promote 5-day week. So we think that a bottom-up approach with the department trying to look at the issue, they may not be that proactive. They may try to do less instead of introducing changes. So is it possible for the CSB to take a top-down approach? In the paper, you are saying that there are a number of departments like the Highways Department, the FEHT, the LCSD, who are having 6-day week. Can you set up dedicated teams under the CSB and then try to put more pressure or give more targets for these relevant departments so that they can look at the workflow targetedly and listen to the views of the staff? So can we adopt a top-down approach in encouraging 5-day week? I think this is better than having a general biannual survey instead. I think you should be more targeted. Try to focus at the departments which are not having 5-day week for the moment. Secretary, thank you. For the promotion of technology, I think the departments are very proactive. As I have said, with the use of technology, the departments can make more use or better use of their manpower resources, and they are more accurate and they make less mistakes. So I think the department will not be inert to having technology. In the past few years, we have been looking at the establishment of the departments strictly. We have actually have a reduction in the number of civil servants by about some 2,000, despite the increase in workload. So under the situation whereby they cannot increase staff number, there is actually a great incentive for the departments to deploy technology. For the works departments or the public departments, we are working towards a public interest, so we have to be more cautious in planning the use of technology, and that will take time. On the mode, whether it should be a bottom-up approach from the department or top-down approach from the CSB, we are actually looking at the very detailed operation of departments. For example, the shifts of particular departments, some of them are actually very complicated, and it will be difficult for the CSB to understand about that because it concerns the work of the department and the duties that they have to perform. For example, like the discipline services, they are actually professional service. It is difficult for us to understand whether improvements can be made to their shift patterns, etc. So I think it is better to defer to the departments concerned. In my opening remarks, I have pointed out that during the compilation of statistics, there are actually a number of departments who are undertaking trial schemes, and they are not included in the 85% of civil servants who are working on a 5-day week. So those trials involve some 4,000 civil servants. So we can see that for the departments, they are actually trying to promote 5-day week within divisions of the department. So they're actually very proactive. But we have to bear in mind that there should not be disincentive to the department, and we should try to boost staff morale. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Chair. We talk about the 5-day week every year. My first question for the Secretary, what is the difference between this year's paper and that of last year? Apart from the change in the statistics, you have 3% more of civil servants having 5-day week. The other things are more or less the same. So you have been promoting 5-day week for many years. So for departments who are undertaking 5-day week, do they encounter any problems? When we liaise with the civil servants concerned, they do point out to us that some issues or questions have been arised. For example, when they signed the contract, the number of working days is 6. Now the number of working days have been reduced to 5. So they are having very odd working hours. They may have to report duty at 9:14 a.m. and then at 8:43 p.m. they would only be discharged. So this will be a very odd timing, and they have to change their travel pattern to work as well. So they are not accustomed to it, and they may be late for work as a result. This is not a general situation, but I do think there are such cases. I remember last year I raised a similar question. For the long term, would the government consider that you can change the employment contract to say that they have to report for duty at 9 a.m.? Well, maybe it would affect the pay points, but I think the government should address the issue head on. It is not just saying boosting the staff morale. Not many people will remember that they have to go back to work by 9:14 a.m. For the members of the public who are using public service, say, for example, the SWD, the post office, or the ICAC, they only open shop at 9 a.m., but then they do not have the full staff ready by then. So I hope that you will look at the root of the problem, see whether you can do anything about the employment contracts so that the implementation of 5-day week will be stabilized. So, Secretary, do you have to update the employment contract as a result of 5-day work? Thank you for the question. For the employment contract of civil servants, it is stated the number of working hours that have to be fulfilled. This will be discussed at the next agenda item today. My understanding is that the number of days of work has not been specified in the contract. We look at working hours. That's why we can roll out the 5-day week without changing the employment contract. When we implement 5-day week, one of the criteria is that the number of working hours will not be affected. If it is 6 days or 5.5 days, or there may be 6 shifts in the past, they may be changed to a 5-day week or 5 shifts. But then the number of hours for a shift will be lengthened as a result. So in the past, if we work 5.5 days, for the half day, it incur 4 hours. And so the 4 hours have to spread throughout the 5 days. For the change of shift, it affects some civil servants, but not all of them. For the civil servants who are on shifts, when they change their shift duty, it is a very common situation. Very, very rarely do we see civil servants who who have to take night shifts throughout his career or a day shift. So definitely there will be change of shifts involved. So they have to be accustomed to such work. This is part of their job and they have to do so. Well, the time for reporting for duty may be a bit odd, say 9:14 or 8:43 a.m. That may happen because the time for getting off duty is also not at around hour. So we try to calculate the working hours carefully, and we try to ask our staff to come to office before the office is open to the public. And for the time for reporting duty, that we may try to standardize that, but then the time for getting off may be different. So we would defer that to the heads of departments. Chairman, I understand what you're saying. I have received information from the civil servants. They have very different shifts. They may work from 9 to 5, but then for a certain day, they may have to report for duty at 9:14, and then for other days, they have to report duty at 8 something. So my question is, you are not trying to change the condition to hours of work, and you try to divide them by 5 days. So this is not sustainable. You are just talking about a difference of a few minutes. Is it possible for them to report for duty at 9 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. all at the same time? So can you go back and give it a thought? Can you change the conditioned hours of work? Because you're saying that the contract cannot be changed and you try to change the working time for the staff. So let's continue to discuss that after the meeting. Next, Mr. Johnny Ng. Thank you, Chair. I think 5-day week is a family-friendly measure and is conducive to society harmony. Well, some countries are actually promoting 4-day week. Maybe the situation is different from us, but I would like to know whether there is an assessment as to whether there will be extra resources incurred in terms of manpower and financial resources for the promotion of 5-day week, because we have a huge budget deficit now. So how are we going to balance manpower requirement and civil servants' family life? The second question, as stated in the paper, there are 4 conditions for promoting 5-day week. There are 4 basic principles, as stated in the paper. But have you looked at the societal needs and see whether you should review them? For example, enhancing productivity. Because working hours is one factor, but productivity is also very important. The second point is to make good use of technology to enhance efficiency so that 5-day week will provide better results. We now have a lot of new technology that can assist us. So don't just stick to the 4 basic principles. Secretary, thank you, Chair. For additional resources, we have not conducted any assessment, but it is definite that there will be additional resources incurred. As the example I've pointed out, say for the Correctional Services Department, if they have to promote 5-day week, then they would have to reduce their working hours because it is a very strenuous work requiring manual labor. So we have to see whether we're making best use of public resources. Second, they would have to employ more staff. So under such circumstances, additional resources will be incurred for the 5-day week work pattern. But we do not want to change the principle of incurring no additional staffing resources. That's why we have to look at other solutions like the use of technology. Mr. Ng has asked whether we would introduce additional principles, well, like the use of technology. Actually, in general, this is one thing that we are according priority to. It is not just confined to 5-day week. We are actually urging departments to employ the use of technology. You will remember that in the policy address last year, we actually have a new measure. That is, the CSB and the digital office will work together. We will go to the departments to visit them and see whether there is room for making use of technology to alleviate workload. So we will work hard on that. So one of the side effects is that there is more room. There will be more room for department to introduce 5-day week work pattern. Next, Mr. Chen Zhenying.
我喺商
In my career in the private sector, I have two occasions of experience. One is to switch to a 5-day week, and we have to work one more hour every day. And the second time, for those who have to work on Saturday in a 5-day week work pattern, they will be paid overtime for working on Saturdays. So I have a similar question with Mr. Joining. Well, the first principle here is no additional staffing resources. It doesn't say no additional financial resources. So can you pay overtime to civil service working on Saturdays by providing some financial resources to make it possible? But we know we have a deficit problem. But if only a few civil servants are involved in this, and can you work out the relevant sums required to make it possible? You have 4 principles. Well, they are not very flexible. You know, some other parties, some other organizations have resorted to other means. Would you consider those as well? And also, for some departments which are unable to do this, I don't understand why. They are talking about the immigration checkpoints, the LCSD, and etc. Well, you are not talking about a 5-day work pattern which only involve Monday to Friday. There can be other patterns. Can you talk to the departments to say they have different work shifts arrangements and implement 5-day week without violating the 4 principles? They started in 2006. More than 10 odd years have passed, and the civil service trade unions have been telling us that this has not been resolved after so many years. First question is whether we can pay them overtime work. Well, I have said that we have to make the best use of public funds. We have a policy to introduce family-friendly measures, but we have to make sure that we make the best use of public funds. Well, if you ask people to work overtime, you are in effect asking for additional staff resources. So this is not going to be considered, given that we have those 4 basic principles. But can arrangements be made to have some variety? Well, actually, for the 4,100 civil service which have been covered, or which are not, which are going to be covered, if possible, they are working shifts. Yes, in some departments or for some posts, this is not yet possible. For example, for posts involving physical work, if you ask them to work longer shifts, it's additional physical demand at which they may not be able to cope. As for it's also true for counter services. They have to provide the services on Saturdays. Let's say we turn their work to 5-day work, and the counters will be open for longer hours in those 5 days. But it's not going to be useful to the clients to the users of the services because they may be able to only to come during the weekend. But of course, technology has been advancing very rapidly. I cannot really rule out that in the future, maybe more work can be taken by new technology. And also for services which are seeing a decline in demand, for example, postal services, we may be able to reduce the provision gradually. Mr. Dennis Leung. Well, in introducing the 5-day week by the Secretary mentioned that this is not part of the condition of pay, condition of employment. I beg to differ. Well, the 5-day week has been implemented for some 20 years already. You must have gained more experience. Actually, to the civil servants concerned, they really regard this as part of their condition of employment. Now turning to the 4 basic principles, for example, no additional staffing resources, no reduction in emergency services, and also continue provision of essential counter services on Saturdays or Sundays. We're talking about provision of services to the public, but the arrangement for civil service vis-a-vis the government should be separate from the need to provide services to the public in considering whether 5-day week should be implemented. Otherwise, it's not very fair to your employees. I know that you have a system where there is a stipulation of working hours. The government should consult civil service. For example, if they have to work from 9 to 6 and the services provided during the weekday may not be able to meet the public demand, maybe you can provide the service on Saturdays instead of from Monday to Friday, so that more civil servants can switch to the 5-day work pattern, 5-day week pattern. And you know your civil servants, directors would be posted every now and then, so they may not have the patience to follow up on this continuously. So I hope the Bureau can work even harder to implement 5-day week. Well, here I have to say I beg to differ. Well, in the contract side between the civil servant and the government, we have to set the conditions of service set out in the employment contract. This will not be changed likely because of the circumstances of work. For example, the work hours. Well, we don't have a working day stipulation, but we have the working hours stipulated in the memorandum on the conditions of service. So we will not ask a civil servant to say work 24 hours a day and then take a day off the next day, but usually they would have to work several hours during the week, and it's not going to be a fixed pattern. So as a matter of fact, the 5-day week is not a condition of service. Of course, we need to be mindful that we have to let our colleagues to have rest, to have some good rest. So we cannot ask them to work from Monday to Sunday. As for whether the management of government departments is committed to this, well, as I've just said, 5-day week is not going to harm the department in any way. on the contrary, if they can implement 5-day week, it's good for morale. So government departments and their management are really interested in getting this implemented. And I understand they have a good communication with their staff, with the trade unions of their staff, and there are also formal departmental consultative mechanisms. And frontline staff, I know, have views, and very often their views can be communicated to the management. You mentioned, the member mentioned that the director of departments will be rotated every few years, but it's not a matter for the director or commissioner alone. Very often the shifting arrangement is carried out by their management staff. So I believe staff at the management levels will also be interested to see this done. Mr. Benson, look, I noticed that in the past few years, in taking forward the trial scheme on the conversion to 5-day week trial scheme, and there are more civil servants covered by 5-day week work, and I understand that this is good for retention of staff and their morale. I work in a private company. Therefore, on the whole, I agree with the 4 basic principles on the implementation of 5-day week. I have personal experience in converting to a 5-day week's arrangement. At that time we would be off at 6:40 instead of 6 p.m. in order to have 5-day week work pattern. According to a union submission, they would like to see proposals coming from the unions on how to implement 5-day week. I understand that at present, usually the proposed pattern will be formulated by the departments. So my question is, what is the general approach? Is this a bottom-up approach, or the opposite is true, or will different departments adopt different approaches in trying to implement this? And some other members have already mentioned the adoption of AI or new technology to enable this to happen. At a security panel meeting, members mentioned that we should adopt new technology for the face recognition or for case investigation by LEAs. In the past, they have to ask an officer to monitor the CCTV video footage. Now they can use an AI software. So my point is, can we use AI more extensively to enable 5-day week to be implemented more extensively? Some members have asked whether this is a bottom-up approach or top-down approach. Well, I would say that it's both. Usually, the shifting, the work shift arrangement, and also the demand for service from the public may be subject to subtle changes over time, and maybe some minor adjustments can be made to the work arrangement to accommodate for the needs. And of course, the frontline staff will know this, and frontline management and even senior management will understand what this is about. We know there's good communication between the different levels of staff. Some of the proposals did in fact come from frontline staff, and the departments, this management are interested to do this. For example, for hawker control team in the LCSD, they trial out certain scheme from 3 districts to 5, and then to the entire hawker controls team. Well, I was briefed by the director of LCS. This is to illustrate that department managements are also interested in getting this implemented, and then staff morale can be boosted to 5-day week. And also, I mentioned we have worked with the government digital enhancement office on the adoption or more adoption of new technology and to enhance the digital working environment. 5-day week is a byproduct of this, but the adoption of technology is not solely because of the need to implement 5-day week.
Next, Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. Well, the 5-day week has been introduced for a long time, and I think it produced good results. I think today, when we discuss this issue, we should bear in mind that this is something very meaningful. And for the last civil servants to migrate to the system, it will be the most challenging ones. But we always say that there are more solutions than problems. So I would like to know whether the CSB will be more proactive to liaise with the departments concerned and give them more impetus. I think this is very important. During colleagues' discussion, we talk about the need for extra manpower resources. The objective or the purpose of introducing 5-day week will definitely involve extra resources. You have to ask the staff to see how to roll that out in the department. We talk about the use of AI and the computer programs, but you got to provide resources, even you make use of a computer system to devise a more shifting pattern in the department. So I would like to know whether CSB can allocate some resources to the departments for this purpose of rolling out FWD. The Secretary has talked about the Correctional Services Department, where actually the staff there have a very challenging work. If you ask them to work for longer hours, say 8-9 hours to achieve 5-day week, it will be very difficult. But don't forget that they have actually introduced smart prisons recently, so they are very successful in using technology. I think for the long term, if they want to achieve 5-day week, would you provide more resources for the department? I'm not talking about manpower resources. I'm talking about other resources, say like computer. Will you be prepared to support the department so that they can make use of computers to enhance the migration of civil servants to a 5-day week? Will you provide them with greater support? If you can do so, then I think the departments will be easier in implementing 5-day week. I think even the staff unions will also be in support. The Secretary has said that the staff union of CSD has pointed out that it is difficult for them to work longer hours in order to achieve 5-day week. But I think you can have a win-win situation. You have to provide them with policy support. I think you must provide policy support for the department to get hold of more computers. Otherwise, it will be difficult for them to provide FWD. I think we're talking about the last mile here. We must give them more support for taking this last mile to full implementation of 5-day week. So please help the departments and help the staff unions. Thank you, Chair. Secretary. Well, I personally meet with the heads of department every year to look at the manpower resources of the individual departments and staffing issues. 5-day week is actually one of the items to be discussed at my meeting with the HOD. So I have been urging the departments to do so. Well, the example I just quoted that there is incentive for the departments to roll out 5-day week because it is welcomed by the staff, and there will be better staff morale as a result. So for departments which require additional resources or which may affect their service provision, they will be having difficulties. But we will continue to try hard. We will try to urge HODs to do so wherever there is room for introducing 5-day week. The second question is whether I would support departments to employ more technology and AI in order to achieve 5-day week. As I have explained before, even if we're not talking about 5-day week, I would encourage department to make better use of technology, because the technology these days can alleviate a lot of human work, and they will be more precise and correct. Even if we don't talk about 5-day week agenda, I would still encourage departments to make use of technology to alleviate workload. So you can rest assured that definitely CSB will support departments to fight for more resources and make better use of technology in the departments concerned. But there are certain circumstances whereby the question cannot be resolved by the provision of additional resources. If we talk about CSD again, they may need land for having new prisons, so these are other resources required, and that's beyond the ambit of CSB. And under other circumstances, with the use or deployment of the resources, we still have to look at the output of workload and also the public's demand for public service, and have to see whether the department is able to meet with such additional demand. So it is an interplay of various factors, and there may be circumstances which will be very simple, and we can be able to achieve a certain number of staff on the FWD work pattern. But nonetheless, we will continue to work hard to do so. We would encourage the use of technology, be it FWD work pattern or not. Next, Mr. Kok Wai-chuen. Thank you, Chair. I think it is difficult to make a start for everything. I think we have to thank the government for accepting the proposal to roll out 5-day week and has been implementing it for years. It is a family-friendly measure. As the Secretary has pointed out, it also helps to boost the morale of departments concerned. So for the past decade or so, departments have been working hard on it, and we can see that under the challenging situation, the number of staff on FWD work pattern has been increasing. A lot of colleagues has pointed out that we are now reaching the sort of final stage, and it will be the most challenging stage. So we hope that there will be some changes. In the past, we defer to the department to come up with proposal and then to undertake trial schemes. And if it works, then go for the 5-day week work pattern. But I think these days, we are talking about a more challenging situation here. I think the departments will need some support. They cannot just work on their own. Colleagues have pointed out that we all hope that the CSB will try to take a look at those departments which are not able to conduct FWD and what are the problems that they are actually facing, and then provide them with more support and try to address the issue together with them. So I hope the CSB would do so. Secondly, there are actually benefits brought about by the 5-day week. And for the departments who are unable to do so, I would like to know, for such departments, are they providing regular reports to the CSB as to why they are not doing 5-day week? If they don't provide such information to the Bureau, then we cannot address the core of the problem. For the HOD, they may just say that it is not possible to do so in my department, and then there is no follow-up. So my question is, do you have reports from the HODs on the implementation of a 5-day week? The third point, We are now having a budget deficit, and we have received views from various departments. For example, the post office is not having good business these days, and they don't have people using their service on Saturdays and Sundays. But you require them to open shop on Saturdays and Sundays, so then that will incur costs and also manpower resources and admin costs. So from Monday to Friday, there may be people going to the post office to pay certain fees, and they may have to queue up for it, but there are not too many people who are posting mails or small parcels. But now they have to work over the weekend, so it is very costly and not effective. So for such details, can you look at it? If it is not cost effective, can you ask the post office to stop providing service on Saturdays and Sundays and then just work on Mondays to Fridays? We all want to do a better thing, and we want to abide by the principle of having no additional resources. It would be even better if we have some cost savings. So would you look at such departments? Secretary, well, for the actual difficulties that they are facing, we do understand that. You can see that we have summarized the difficulties faced by the departments in the paper.
係面對咩困難，或者
For the departments, they may be facing more than one problem, and the different divisions may be facing different problems. So we are aware of the situation, and we want to try to help them to resolve the problem. But I think we may have to deploy technology in order to have some breakthrough. For reporting regular reports, as I have said, every year I will meet with the head of the department. We will have a meeting and we will discuss a list of issues concerning staffing and manpower resources. And the implementation of 5-day week is on the agenda, something that I will review in conjunction with the HOD, and it will be the opportunity for the HOD to reflect to me what are the problems that they are facing.
我亦都會用嗰個機會去
If I think that the department can work faster, I will urge them to do so. So we do have regular reviews. On other details, for instance, if there is less demand for public service during certain time period, would it be possible for the department to stop provision of service during such time? Actually, we are doing that for the Labour Department. They now make use of new technology. They provide online employment service so that the citizens can access to the job vacancies of the department every time. And then for the employment center and the relevant centers, some 200 members of the staff have changed to the 5-day week since last April. So the departments will try to see whether it is possible to suspend the provision of service during a certain time slot. We have to see whether there will be objection from the public and whether inconvenience will be caused to the public. So we are always looking at that. So please rest assured that if it is possible for the department to suspend provision of service during certain time slot without affecting the public, will definitely do so. We now have to have a 1% cost saving for departments for the next financial year. So a lot of departments are trying to look at measures, and they will take that into account. Next, Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chair. I personally hope that 5-day week will be fully implemented within the civil service as soon as possible. I fully support that. Well, I'm happy to note that, Chairman, you have put the 5-day week and the conditioned hours of work at one meeting for discussion, because I think the two issues are actually related. When I look at countries overseas, when they talk about the civil service working hours or the work arrangements, they are actually moving ahead of Hong Kong. A lot of places are not talking about 5-day week. That has been implemented for long. They are now discussing about flexible working hours. Why do they want to do that? One thing is to boost staff morale. Another question is because there is aging in society. A lot of people are carers and they need flexible working hours. And this is also in pace of societal developments, and it will incentivize people to join the civil service. Also, it is good for the environment because not everyone has to go to work every day. So I want to share with you there are actually different arrangements in different countries and they are more advanced than us. So I would like to ask the Secretary, will you set a target? It is not very meaningful to talk about the issue from time to time. Would you set a target so that there will be substantial progress? Secondly, I want to ask about technology. A lot of colleagues have talked about that. I fully agree that we should deploy more technology because they can help us a lot. And I think we should make use of technology to help us implement 5-day week more quickly. Another point that I would like to ask is, Secretary, I understand that you have a survey biannually and you try to look at the implementation of 5-day week in bureaus and departments. So I would like to ask, when you conduct the surveys, so apart from statistics, would you also assess the impact of FWD on staff morale and the quality of civil service? So is it just a quantitative survey or is it a qualitative one? Last point, Chair, a colleague has pointed out that there should be a detailed examination as to how 5-day week would affect the wellness of the civil servants and how you can retain civil servants and try to enhance their feelings. Would you conduct such studies?
主席，
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, the setting of an objective. As I answered another member's questions, we have certain conditions here. So we do not have an objective set for ourselves, and we do not intend to do so. We have to live within the 4 basic principles. This is part of our policy to implement family-friendly measures, and at the same time, we have to make the best use of public funds. So we're not going to set an objective on 5-day week. Having said that, the adoption of new technology to enhance our productivity and our efficiency and is in itself a major policy in the government. We have the Digital Policy Office to take matters forward. But of course, the adoption of new technology might result in a byproduct that it will become possible to implement 5-day week. We conduct a survey every 2 years, but as I've said, I have many meetings with departmental heads, and we will discuss various subjects, including 5-day week. And we also explore the effects of 5-day work on the quality of work of staff and the feedback of staff. Of course, quality must be ensured because we don't want our civil service colleagues to work very long hours, and quality is therefore affected because of this. So quality of work must not be affected. That's a precondition. It's not something that we just covered in a survey. As for the mental well-being of civil service and the ability to take care of their family better, we know from our experience since the introduction of the 5-day week work pattern, we know there's been enhancement and improvement, as the heads of departments have told us, and the civil service in those departments have provided feedback to this effect. I would be looking into this annually with heads of government departments All right, now it's my turn to ask questions. Many members have raised a number of issues. And in the introduction given by the Secretary has mentioned 5 departments which are doing some trial schemes. Can you tell us the work nature of these departments? I know it's not ideal to provide additional funding to make 5-day work possible. You are talking about many posts involving physical work or counter services. If we do not consider closing on Saturdays, can you consider doing something like our public museums that the service is closed on a weekday? Or like what some restaurants are doing now, they will close on Monday, although they are open on Sunday. We're talking about LCSD, Highways Department, Hong Kong Police Force, LCSD, and the Transport Department, which are doing some trial schemes. They are working on things like changing shift work patterns and arrangements. So it's really involving changes to the work shifts. And, well, actually, our latest survey was cover the things up to September 2024, and the Highways Department has completed the trial scheme in January 2025, and 5-day week have now been implemented for the relevant civil service in the Highways Department. So among the 4,100 civil servants covered by the trial scheme, some of them are already covered. So next year, we will see an increase to the percentage coverage. Yes, I expect this to further go up. Among the 4 Highways Department, just 37 civil servants are involved. Actually, the departments will be working on this one division of the department after another. The heads of departments, they are committed to this. They will look at their different departmental sections and divisions one by one. So I believe it's another. We are looking forward to another 3% increase, and the number will go up to another level. We mentioned CSD, but they are not covered by the 5 that you mentioned. You said the CSD did try this and they found it too difficult. So would you be advising departments to try it out for, say, 3 months and revert back if it's not possible? Would you be giving advice like this? Well, usually the trial would go on for 6 months. If they have further issues to try out, they would apply for an extension. We will not just put a stop to that after 6 months. We like the departments to smooth out the difficult parts of implementation, and then try to see if it's possible. All right. So we move on to the next item on the agenda is conditioned hours of work of the civil service. Members who wish to speak, please press the button now. Mrs. Young, over to you for an introduction. We have more than 170,000 civil servants working in different departments providing service to the public. Their nature of work differs. Of course, they have different conditioned hours of work. The conditioned hours of work is on a gross working hour and net working hour basis. If it's a gross conditioned hour, it would include meal time. If it's on a net conditioned hour basis, it doesn't cover the meal time. Some 60% of civil service are working for 44 hours gross per week. The rest are working from 45 hours gross to 51 hours gross per week, depending on the work nature. As for those who are working on a net condition hours of system, their hours of work will be 45 hours net per week. This is because we have taken into account different conditions in setting the conditioned hours of work for different civil service posts to ensure that we make the best use of public funds. Any change to the condition of hours, we have to make sure that there are three conditions met. That is, no additional staffing requirement, no adverse impact to public service, and if a department before they submit an application for changing or reducing the condition of hours for their staff, they will carry out trial schemes. And the CSB, in considering such suggestions, will look at the duties that they have to discharge, and also the impact to other grades or ranks if the conditioned hours of work of some staff are reduced. And we'll ask the departments to re-examine and simplify the workload, or work out different work procedures and reducing or restructuring shift patterns and make better use of technology, etc. In recent years, after completion of trial scheme, the condition of hours of work of explosive officers to rank were proved to reduce. As for other trial schemes, that they carry out certain trial schemes as well, covering two grade or two ranks. And if they can meet the three conditions concerned, they would submit an application for a formal reduction of the condition of hours of these grades. I understand some members are concerned about the meal break provision of the work hours arrangement. Because of the difference in nature of work, the different departments have adopted different systems for providing meal break to their staff. Whether they are working on a gross hour or net hour system, they will be given a meal break in some departments. But due to operation needs, staff working pattern, and the need to maintain public services, some departments will be given time for a meal break during the shift hours. If there's no formal meal time provided, and if we provide a meal break to them, that they will have to go off work at a later hour in order to meet the stipulated conditions of hours of work in the agreement, and staff may not like to do this. As I've said, the conditioned hours of work is part of the employment contract, and at the same time we have to make sure that the level of public service provided to the public, as well as the financial commitment. Well, it's just like what we have covered in our discussion on 5-day week. We believe, well, if the departments can comply with the three condition concerns, they would further explore the ways and means to reduce the conditioned hours of work for some of their civil service posts. I'm happy to take questions. Mr. Lam Chang-sing, Mr. Johnny Ng, Mr. Dennis Leung, and Mr. So Chung Wing have pressed the button to ask questions. Mr. Lam Chang-sing, 45 hours without a meal break. Well, we are usually talking about front night or the technical staff. It can be traced back to the time when we have a distinction between white-collar jobs and blue-collar jobs. or is max of discrimination. Of course, you are now trying to align the bank holidays with public holidays for the labor sector. You have been talking about the three conditions: no additional resources, no additional staff, and no adverse effect to public service. I understand the need to make the best use of public funds. And also, in recent years, for the same grade, you only allow a change or reduction of conditions hours of work if all the departments with the same rank are agreeable. This is an additional requirement. For example, for a certain grade, the majority of the civil servants are working in one particular department, but there are some fewer members of the same grade working in other departments, and they cannot do this in those departments. As a result, the majority or the entire grade cannot be benefited from the reduction to, for example, the reduction of condition hours of work. For example, foreman in the FEHD and a foreman working in the another department. The nature of work is very different. And also, if you look at the hospital authority, well, their frontline staff have their conditions hours of work. The majority of them, I'm saying, have seen the reduction to 44 hours of work per week with a meal break. But they are a small minority. So it's a question for the government, not for the hospital authority. If the working hours are aligned among the same grade, it will be better for the HA. They will think it's beneficial. Can you do this? Can you further deregulate the requirements?
The second question is a simple one. For the chainman grade, I think this is actually a case of success. In the past, we have emphasized whether they can move from 45 hours to 44 hours, but now we're not talking about standardizing the hours of work. For the chainman grade, they have moved from 45 hours net per week to 45 hours gross per week. Well, I'm not saying that we are going to reduce from 45 to 44 hours, but will this case be more acceptable to you and better to be implemented? So no matter whether the civil servant is working about 44, 45, or even 50 hours, then they all have a paid meal break. Would that be easier to be implemented? SES? Chair, for the first question, for the same grade, the same condition of hours of work will be required, although they are spanning across different departments. We think that we do have to abide by this criteria because on the surface, you may say that the work undertaken by them, say for the foreman grade, they are only supervising other staff in different departments. But for other foremen in other departments, they may be doing law enforcement work. So for the description of the duties for the grade, they are all stated clearly. And it is not outside the remit of the duties and responsibilities. So under such circumstances, we think that the same grade, they should have the same conditions of hours of working, despite they are in different departments. So if we divide their salary by the number of hours, it will be the same. Otherwise, it will be different. Because when they enter at the department, they may be doing the same duties, and it will be difficult to say why they have different pay if they are employed in different departments.
情況，亦都令
It will be unfair. And then also they are of the same academic requirements and also capability requirements. if we have different pay for different departments, it will also affect the recruitment exercises of the departments concerned because we're talking about the same grade. So that's why we think that the same grade should have the same conditions of hours of work. This is principle number one. Secondly, we are talking about meal breaks now. When we're not talking about whether it's a paid meal break or not, the question is actually you are trying to see whether you're going to divide the meal break by the pay according to gross hours of work or net hours of work. We're just trying to divide that by the total number of working hours. So it is only because the denominator is different. So we're actually talking about a question of working hours. As I have said in my opening remarks, for colleagues who do not have a proper meal break, if we give them a proper meal break and we don't change their working hours, then their off-duty time will be postponed accordingly. And we have actually consulted colleagues concerned, and the majority of them do not prefer so. They want to get off work earlier and have, not a formal meal break. So we have to look at the situation of the great concern to see whether there is room for all of them to reduce the number of working hours. In the past, there may be some work processes which are no longer needed, and we can make use of technology. Then maybe we would be able to be less labor intensive. If there is room for such improvement, we'll definitely do so, and then we can generally reduce the number of working hours. But if we don't have such a prerequisite, then I think we have to abide by the number of working hours stated in the Memoranda of Condition of Service. Well, the Secretary has pointed out that for the chainman grade and for the transport inspector rank, they have been undertaking trial schemes on reducing the conditioned hours of work. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? How can they reduce from 40 hours net per week to 45 hours gross per week? How are you going to do so? And based on past experience, you said that if the three prerequisites can be fulfilled, then they are able to reduce the number of working hours. I'm not going to repeat the three prerequisites, but how many departments or how many grades fulfill the three prerequisites? Have you set any targets or timetable for streamlining the work procedures and also reducing the manpower requirements of such departments? Thank you, Chairman. Well, for the chainman grade or for the transport inspector rank, they are all using the better use of technology and streamlining work procedures in order to reduce the conditioned hours of work generally for the whole rank or grade. So that's why we can see that the deployment of new technology is very important, just like 5-day week. If you make use of technology, you can be able to reduce the work requirements and the staff requirements. And same as 5-day week, we also have a prerequisite here. We do not want to incur additional resources. You don't want to incur additional manpower. And also we want to maintain the same level of service to the public. So we have not set a target as to when we have to reduce the number of hours of work by a certain extent. And for some grades, there are shifting arrangements and they are more complicated. If we reduce the number of hours of work, it will affect the work quality as a whole. So that's why we don't have a target as to when we should achieve that. But when we look at the government departments, we do encourage better use and greater use of technology. This is high on our agenda. So for 5-day week or for reducing conditional hours of work, we would also try to encourage use of technology. A follow-up question, Chair. You are saying that if they use technology, they can reduce the 45 hours net to 45 hours gross. We may even be able to number to 44. But for the manpower saved, have you studied as to whether they can be deployed to other grades? Well, if with the technology they can complete the job in 30 hours instead of 45, then the staff will be underwork. So will you deploy them to other departments? Thank you, Chair. If we make use of technology and we can reduce manpower requirement, we can promote 5-day week and less condition of hours of work, then definitely we can try to reduce the manpower requirements. Actually, for the departments with the use of technology, they would look at their establishment and they can reduce their establishment. In recent years, for the past 2 years, as a whole, we were able to reduce some 2,000 civil service posts because of the use of technology. Also, we have additional work and the staff concerned will be deployed for these additional duties. So we will try to look at the establishment and the strength. We'll try to control that. Next, Mr. Dennis Leung. Chairman, actually a number of staff unions have submitted submissions to us. About 5 of them have made submissions concerning the topic that we are discussing. For the working hours, there are now 2 types. We have the net hours per week and we also have the gross working hours per week. But for the calculation of the gross working hours per week, you are talking more about the staff who are working indoors and the management. But for the grade which are using the net conditioned hours, they are more the frontline staff and staff undertaking outdoor work. Well, some unions have pointed out that this is actually a legacy from the colonial government. Now we have returned to the motherland for a number of years already. So whether they are having different positions, whether they are working outdoors or indoors, I think these civil servants are serving the community. Would it be possible to standardize the arrangements for them? Especially for staff, frontline staff who are working outdoors, they are working under rainy and sunny weather. Is there room for helping them? Is it possible to standardize the conditioned hours of work? Well, Chairman, for the net working hours per week, I agree that mostly they concern the frontline staff, but they are not necessarily working outdoors. For the grade, like the explosive officer 2, who are able to reduce their working hours, they don't have a lot of outdoor work. For others, civil servants, they are using the gross working hours, especially the discipline services. Most of them are frontline and they may work outdoors. So there is not a correlation between the 2 different ways of presenting working hours. And I don't think it has anything to tie in with the handover of the sovereignty to our mainland. I think it is only looking at the deployment of staff and the work requirements. As to whether there is room for consolidation, we have actually quoted a number of examples, like the chainman grade and the transport inspector rank, and also the explosive officer 2 rank. They have all undergone consolidation, and they make use of new technology, electronic systems, and also they simplify their workflow. Like the explosive officer 2, they use electronic licensing and inspection systems, so they were able to reduce the working hours for the rank as a whole. So this is something that we have been working on. We actually is not just try to reduce the hours of work, but we want to make use of resources to provide better service and be more precise and correct. Next, Mr. So Chang-wing. Thank you, Chairman. The Secretary has reminded us that we should not stick to the point of meal break and pay meal break. But if we look at the paper, I have some questions. It is stated in the paper that the gross condition hours of work will include the meal break, the time for the meal break. But for the net conditions of hours, it will exclude the meal break. And now 14% of the civil servants are working on net conditions hours, and then every week they have to work for 45 net hours. But if you look at the gross working hours, for these civil servants, they account for 86% of the total, and 60% of them are working 44 hours gross per week. So for those on the net working hours, they work for 45 hours. And then for the rest of the 60% of civil servants, they are working from 45 hours gross to 51 hours gross per week. So my question is, why for the majority of the civil servants' pay meal break, their gross working hours per week is actually less than those who are on a net gross, a net hour per week. And in 2022, there was a lateral question saying that by 2021, so the civil servants on non-pay meal break will account for 13.7%. But in the paper, you are saying that as of September last year, the percentage was 40%. So actually the percentage has increased. So civil servants on net condition hours without a pay meal break actually has increased. So why is this the case?
As the Secretary has said, that as a matter of preference, some civil servants would rather go off work earlier instead of having a meal break included in the working hours. Also, it's inclusive or exclusive of meal breaks in the counting of working hours. Whether it's a gross or net working hours, we're not just talking about working hours. There are other factors involved. For example, for those working on a gross working hours, the majority is 44 hours. You may ask why it's even lower than those with gross working hours. Apart from working 44 hours, first of all, the working hours would include meal breaks, but they have to carry out their duty if need be. It's not that during the meal break they will not do any work. If there's an emergency, they will have to deal with that. And secondly, they don't have the flexibility of going off earlier if they just use, say, 30 minutes or 20 minutes for the meal break. For those working on a net working hours systems, well, they will have this sort of flexibility if we provide them with a fixed meal break. And about half of those working on a net, on a gross working hour basis, the majority of them will not be able to get overtime pay if they have to do overtime pay. They are not qualified to receive overtime pay even if overtime work is required. And also for compensation leave, some work will not be counted, or time off will not be offered. For example, if a colleague is required to handle media inquiry, well, and a member of the press comes in the late evening, they will have to deal with the relevant work. Sometimes overtime work is not avoidable, but then those working on a net working hour basis, they will be getting overtime pay if they have to need to carry out overtime work. So for those, the majority of those working on a 44-hour gross basis, they will not be entitled to overtime pay or time off in lieu of overtime pay. So this is a common occurrence. So they have different work patterns, in other words. Mr. Benson, look. Today's discussion is on two major aspects. First, the difference between gross working hours, conditions of working hours, and net conditions working hours. There are different arrangements. For example, informal meal break, but of course there will be different arrangement for those working night shifts or irregular hours. So they have adopted different flexible arrangements. I hope you would encourage departments to maintain good communication with their staff to ensure that there's a good working environment for them. Some trade unions, civil service trade unions, have mentioned that there's a comparison, and there's an impression that it's not fair to some. So I would like to ask the Bureau whether you have a long-term objective to combine the two systems so that everyone would be on a gross working hours basis, or are you going to stick to the three prerequisites: cost neutrality, no additional manpower, maintaining same level of service, etc.? Before answering the question of Mr. Look, actually I have missed a question of Mr. So on the increase of percentage of those on net basis. Well, it's just a rounding up. It's a 13.7% to 24,100 in 2021, and in 2024 it's a 23,400. Actually, there's a reduction in the actual number, but in percentage terms, before the overall establishment has decreased, so the percentage has increased. On the question of whether we should align the two systems so that there's no problem with the impression, I've answered a question whether different staff work of the same grade working in different departments can have different working hours. Well, I think we should not compare one rank with another, because the nature of work, the work environment of different grades should not give rise to an impression that we're unfair to some, to one or the other. I've explained to Mr. So that the difference in the net basis and the gross basis is not just about working hours. If we align the two systems, unify the two systems, then they may be subject to the same restrictions that we now apply to those on the gross working hours, such as no overtime paid or even time off in lieu of overtime work. Well, of course, we can align the two systems, in which case those working on a gross basis will have a fixed meal break. But it doesn't mean that you never work during the meal break. You have to deal with necessary tasks if need be. And would that lead to a longer working hours on the whole? Unless you say that I would increase the resources, I will reduce the working hours, come what may. Then the question is whether we should give them a fixed meal break for those who are working on a net basis. And the majority of them have told us that they don't want this because that will result in going off work later than they are now. Mr. So Chong-wing. I just want to offer a brief response in respect of my last question. In 2021, the percentage was 13.7%. That's correct. According to your document or paper, as at September last year, 23,400 accounting for 14%, not 13.6%. I don't know what went wrong. We say about 14%. It's just a rounding exercise. To be exact, it's 13.6%. So we round up the figure to 14%. So in fact, there's a slight decrease in percentage terms, 13.6%. So it used to be 13.6, and now in this paper you said about 14%. So I will compare 14% with the previous level of 13.6%. I don't know, maybe it's your preference. Well, we are talking about difference of less than a percentage point. Maybe next time you should go for a more exact percentage point. All right, if there's no further question, thank you, Secretary for the Civil Service. Anything for under ALB? If not, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.